Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epoch Times, one of America's largest independent newspapers that of course brings you insights beyond the headlines. Now make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe to our show. Again, it helps us reach more people. Now, the culture in the United States is changing pretty drastically, to say the least, actually. This is for film. Look at the movies right now. You have kind of the fading out of the remnants of movies that were created or started a few years back, but they're transitioning to something very different right now. Fashion is changing. Even just social discourse is undergoing a really massive change right now. The former narratives on identity politics are dying. They're fading away. A recent focal point of this shift has been on an American Eagle ad featuring actress Sydney Sweeney. And despite online criticism, actually, the company refused to back off its advertisement. Interestingly, while they were facing all these attacks and criticisms and people crying on camera, the company's stocks just skyrocketed suddenly, which is a very big shift from, say, like the Budweiser effect or the Target effect, when they were going the opposite direction and many companies were seeing their stocks go down. This is a kind of polar opposite shift right now, and even Trump himself seems to be very happy about it. President Donald Trump actually said this on Truth Social. He said, Sydney Sweeney, a registered Republican, has the hottest ad out there. It's for American Eagle, and the jeans are flying off the shelves. He said, go get him, Sweeney. Go get him, Sydney. And on the other side of the ledger, Jaguar did a stupid and seriously woke advertisement that is a total disaster. The CEO just resigned in disgrace, and the company is in absolute turmoil. Who wants to buy a Jaguar after looking at a disgraceful ad? He's, of course, referring to the Jaguar ad that had kind of, I don't know if you call them trans people, but people of unknown gender and with strange fashions parading in front of a camera. And, of course, after that came out, they'd say, well, we have to wait and see how this affects car sales. It turns out the effect was very bad. Jaguar lost a lot of money. And Trump also mentioned something important, Bud Light. He says, shouldn't they have learned a lesson from Bud Light, which went woke and essentially destroyed in a short campaign the company? He said the market cap destruction has been unprecedented, with billions of dollars so foolishly lost. Or just look at woke singer Taylor Swift. Ever since I alerted the world as to what she was by saying on Truth that I can't stand her, he said hate, which he did say before. He said she was booed out of the Super Bowl and became no longer hot. Again, that's an objective statement by Trump. And he said the tide has seriously turned. Being woke is for losers. Being Republican is what you want to be. He said, thank you for your attention to this matter. Interesting discussion from the President of the United States. But he is pointing to something pretty important, because we can look at the companies that people say, you know, go woke, get broke. And while we did see that with some of them, whether you fully agree with it or not, Budweiser took a very long time still trying to recover from its ad with, again, it was like a sponsored thing with a trans activist. And we watched their sales plummet. Jaguar did have that effect. Taylor Swift was kind of mixed. It depends on which way you go with it. But we have seen that many companies lost a lot of money. One of the reasons, notably, why you're not seeing when they have like Pride Month and stuff, or LGBTQ, so on, identity politics, most companies have stopped doing it. You're actually watching a really about-face, 180-degree shift. Everything's turning around right now, and it's going the opposite way. People are unhappy about this on one side, but it's not showing up in company profits. Actually, as we just saw with Sydney Sweeney, it's making the company a lot of money, frankly. And alongside that, interestingly, Justin Bieber also posted a series of photos of himself shooting guns. It looks like an outdoor shooting range. And those photos are also sparking a discussion on whether he's maybe trying to make a statement with this. Is he coming out in support of the Second Amendment? What is he doing? Now, it's not really clear whether he was trying to make a political statement with the photos, but at least online, many people are interpreting it that way. DC Drano, who was involved with Trump's 2016 campaign, wrote on X, quote, just days after Democrats started calling for a national ban on AR-15s, Justin Bieber posted himself shooting an AR-15 to his more than 400 million followers. suggesting the timing of this may have been intentional. Is it? Bieber has not confirmed or denied that. Nothing public on it, but the timing is interesting. He notes as well, American Eagle also doubled down on their ad with Sydney Sweeney, meaning they're not backing off. And he said, we are taking the culture back. Without a doubt, there is a huge culture change now taking place in the United States. And interestingly as well, along those same lines, even public officials and candidates who used to be very much in support of like defunding the police. Remember, that was a big movement started under the Obama administration, where Obama kind of helped spark the Black Lives Matter movement by inviting activists to the White House. That was one of the big narratives of the left for a very long time, even mainstream Democrat politics. Defund the police. They're actually changing on that now. Under Biden, they had already begun changing that. They were actually saying it was Republicans who wanted to defund the police because Republicans in particular were very critical of the FBI at the time. And we're actually now seeing a culture shift on this front, even with people who used to be very, very vocal with statements on defunding the police or condemning the police, really changing their narratives. And interestingly, this includes the Democratic mayoral candidate for New York City, Zohran Mamdani. Remember, he's a Democratic socialist. He used to have a lot of statements kind of making fun of police during the whole 2021, 2022 protests against them. One individual said on X that he saw a police officer crying in his car, dealing with the stress of this. Zohran seemed to celebrate this. The tweet on that has now gone viral. But he's changing his narrative very quickly now. Now he's suggesting he supports police, that he wants to help police, and it's an interesting shift. This is what he said during a recent campaign speech. Watch.
We know it is one that also comes from listening to officers themselves. 200 officers are leaving the department every month. A leading cause of their departure is forced overtime. And the fact that every year we ask them to take on additional responsibilities. We are making it more and more difficult for them to respond to the very responsibilities that drew them to the job in the first place. And I think about the 7 major categories of crime as listed in CompStat. That is not the full extent of what we ask officers to do. The NYPD receives 200,000 mental health calls every year. How can they be expected to respond to that and to this? New Yorkers rightfully have concerns around public safety, and I want to empower police officers to respond to serious crime and hire the mental health professionals to respond to mental health calls.
Now, that's actually a big shift from his older online statements, things that people are digging up right now and posting everywhere, and it's making him kind of look bad. It suggests, again, with this shift, that they're judging that voters do not want light on crime policies. It does appear that they don't want defunding the police. They don't want more crime on the streets. They want to do something with the crazy homeless people. I don't know if that means putting them in safe spaces like mental hospitals or something else. But it is interesting, the political rhetoric is changing. And I'd say also on this whole narrative shift, it does reflect something else we're seeing from many others on the left. They're moving away from the days of defunding the police, but they're also moving away from identity politics. They're shifting the narrative. They're talking now about things that actually impact people's basic quality of life, like economy, right? On the point of what he's talking about also, one thing Zohran is talking about is he is talking about getting rid of some forms of police practice, let's say. In particular, police getting sent to calls where you might have a social worker get sent instead. We've seen the effect of what happens when cities try to replace police with social workers or mental health experts, though. California actually tried this. They're one of the forefront states to actually put that to the test. I've personally spoken to police who've noted in California that these social workers will often refuse to go on calls unless police go with them because it's extremely dangerous for them. They found that social workers go to these calls and they can't handle the situations like police could. The reason being is this. For police, the most dangerous calls are traffic stops and domestic violence. Traffic stops tend to be among the most dangerous because police, of course, are going to people's windows. If the person has a warrant out for their arrest or has having a bad day, oftentimes that does result in violence. Domestic violence cases, though, are also extremely dangerous for police. One of the major calls that police do end up getting killed on, actually. One of the reasons for that, of course, is you have people who are, oftentimes a couple, and they're in love with each other oftentimes, and they're fighting, sometimes in a violent way, which is why they have to call the police in the first place. That type of really heightened emotional turmoil does tend to, if police are seen siding with one side or the other, people often react violently. And the problem you've had in California is when they send social workers on those calls, they're less capable of defending themselves than even police would be. So it's very dangerous for them. Also, people suffering from mental health problems, they tend to pose a really serious danger. They tend to be among the most dangerous. And so if they want to send social workers to deal with those cases, even though it sounds nice, it tends to put them in harm's way. They're actually less equipped to deal with the violence they face. So we'll see how that works with Mamdani going to the polls, because he is still campaigning on that. Now, meanwhile, the U.S. Coast Guard is also celebrating its 235th anniversary, and with that, we're getting some good old military propaganda coming back. We'll be talking more about this after a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. If you're enjoying the show, please support us by hitting the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It really does help us get the show out to more people. Now, in other news, the U.S. Coast Guard, they're celebrating their 235th anniversary, and with that, we're getting some good quality military propaganda. I'm a sucker for this. I love it. Let me show you some of it. First, this is from U.S. Central Command. Watch. And in addition to that, President Donald Trump also posted a different video celebrating the Coast Guard. Watch this. Entertaining stuff, right? What I think is really important with this, though, we've been seeing more videos like this for the military. And I think this is a big deal for a few reasons. This is actually a big change from how the military was presenting itself just a couple years ago. If you remember what commercials were like for the military 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if you go back to like Obama, was also a little different back then because we were still in wars, right? The image the military was presenting, especially under the Biden administration, it was more about identity politics and global warming, and they wanted to have electric tanks. and they were trying to go for this all-inclusive, participation trophy type culture. And it turned a lot of people away. If you looked at military recruitment numbers over the past 4 years, it was very low. It was so bad they were talking about bringing back the draft or mandatory military service, maybe after high school. Military recruitment was that bad. When Trump took office, almost immediately you saw a culture change reflected in how the military presents itself. They're celebrating the military again. The government's very much in support of it. They're presenting the military as war fighters, fighting wars, looking cool, shooting guns, tanks, bombs, things blowing up. The kind of stuff that would have made me want to join when I was a teenager, and kind of still does. I'll tell you, Space Force looks pretty tempting. But on that front as well, this is a culture change. This is a culture shift. And it's also something that Trump and Defense Secretary Hegseth have been talking about. They want to present the military as a more masculine image. And I know that some people might be offended by that, but it's what they're talking about, right? Strength, guns, bombs, fighting, a big shift from acceptance and everybody's a winner and that kind of stuff. They want to present a more masculine image of the military. Representing, I think, overall, the broader culture shift we're now watching, a more conservative image is returning with the United States. And again, an image that celebrates patriotism and American power and all these things. It's making a comeback. And notably as well, what you're seeing not there is identity politics. Identity politics is now being abandoned by the right and the left. You even see in terms of political rhetoric right now, Bernie Sanders, AOC, what are they talking about at the campaign trails? They're talking about the economy. They're talking about livelihood. They're moving away from identity politics to an extent. They still have it a bit, but for the most part, the narratives are shifting away from it. Now, in other news, though, Texas is doing something big as well, moving ahead. They're moving to redistrict ahead of the midterm elections. And the 51 Texas House Democrats, they've now fled the state. Only a handful did not flee. And they did so to intentionally block the vote from taking place. Basically, here's how it works. Texas needs 100 members present for a quorum. And this has the effect, by leaving, of stalling the entire vote. Texas cannot move forward to redistrict if they don't have all these representatives present. They all went to like Detroit. They're fleeing, they're hiding, they're talking to the press. And in response to this, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is saying something pretty serious. He's saying he might bring criminal charges against these individuals. This is what he said on Fox News. Watch.
You said in your statement that you put out today to all of them, in a letter to them, you said in addition to abandoning their offices, these legislators may also have committed felonies. What is the felony? What are the penalties for this?
So very simply, it would be bribery if any lawmaker took money to perform or to refuse to perform an act in the legislature. And the reports are these legislators have been both, they sought money and they offered money to skip the vote, to leave the legislature, to take a legislative act. That would be bribery. And so the facts will have to come out. But I think based upon comments made by legislators themselves, they face a possibility of facing bribery charges, which is a second-degree felony in the state of Texas. There's one way to cure that, and that is if they get back to the state of Texas and make quorum today at a hearing that we have at 3 o'clock, they can cure themselves of any quid pro quo that would subject them to potential bribery charges.
All right.
Now, he's also suggesting that by doing this, the legislators may have to forfeit their seats, meaning he's suggesting they could remove 51 Democrats from their positions. That would be a big deal. And especially because if they're redistricting, and we'll see how that affects kind of like, the state legislator, this could be a big deal. But will it happen? That's a whole other issue, right? Overall, this would be big. Bribery charges, even if you're innocent, it looks bad. Because the public, remember, a lot of people don't read news, they just read headlines. And if they see 51 Democrats charged for bribery, It sounds horrible. Some people will not read the context of it. Innocent or guilty, it's a black stain on your record. The big question, though, is will Texas actually move forward with this? Will they actually try to remove 51 members of the state legislature from their positions? Will they actually bring bribery charges on most of the Democrats in Texas? It's a big threat, right? It would also be very controversial itself because it would look like politicized law. We'd also have to see how the charge like that would hold up in court, because remember, even if you charge somebody, even if you move forward to do it, doesn't mean it's going to happen. You're going to stand before a jury, and if you stand before a jury in a right-wing or left-wing district, politics might color the interpretation of the law. Judges might judge it differently depending on which judge you get. Politics plays a very big role in this, even though in the U.S. we try very hard to keep politics out of law. It's almost unavoidable when things are so emotionally charged. So we'll see if it holds up. Now, on that point also, Democrats are saying the push to redistrict is racist. They're saying this because some of the current districts that vote Democrat, they tend to be more Hispanic or black, black voters in some other areas. And so the whole move to redistrict, again, they're painting it as a race issue. There's two sides to this. On the Republican side, they say, well, look, if you take away the votes from white people, is that racist? Why is it only racist if you do it to other races instead of just white people? The identity politics narrative only holds up if you discriminate, in other words, if you don't regard white people as being a race, frankly. And the whole redistricting move, though, if they move forward with it, this would be huge for Texas. And it wouldn't just be Texas. You would actually see this across the U.S. Currently, these moves are being blocked mostly by identity politics. But if Texas were to do this, it would flip the state almost solid red when it comes to representatives. In particular, Representative Jasmine Crockett, she's raising concerns the redistricting proposal, it would push her out of her own district. In fact, here's what she said during a committee hearing. Watch.
But I know that this legislature did ask us as members of Congress to confirm our addresses. I don't know how many of us actually still reside in the districts that we represent. I do not currently reside in my district based upon the plan that has been drawn, which is another red flag, in addition to courts consistently looking at how many people have been moved.
So if Texas succeeds, the Republicans are able to do this, what does it look like? Well, this could potentially flip 5 seats from Democrat to Republican. And that might not sound like a lot, but it really is, especially when Republicans have a very narrow hold on Congress. Texas, the state has 38 congressional seats. This would likely bring Republicans from their current 25 seats up to around 30 seats. And remember, with the midterm elections coming up, that's a very, very big deal. Republicans, as of right now, they hold both the House and the Senate, right? They hold both houses of Congress. And they're looking for ways to make sure that stays in their control. They want to hold the majority in Congress. There are concerns that if they lose even a couple seats, it'll make it harder for them to get anything done. Democrats tend to be more aligned with each other when they vote, with a few minor exceptions. Republicans tend to not agree with each other as much. And so just because a Republican does something doesn't mean all the Republicans are going to vote together on it. They have a harder time than Democrats getting their own party to vote together, meaning they need to have more than just a minor majority. They need to hold a few extra seats to get things done, typically. Now, on the point of redistricting also, as I mentioned, race is one of the big narratives. It's one of the things blocking Republicans. Republicans, technically, they've had control of redistricting for a very long time. Broadly, they do control the state legislatures, more so than Democrats. They've had the ability to do this, but they've been blocked from doing it because of race politics. And here's why. Every time Republicans try to redistrict, Democrats fight it. They fight it in the courts, and they say that Republicans redistricting, it would mean more power would go to white neighborhoods, and it would take away representation from mostly black and Hispanic neighborhoods. They're suggesting this is disenfranchising voters. It's discrimination because you're taking away people's votes. Republicans on their side are pointing to places like California, where 40% of the state votes Republican. But in terms of representation, it does not show up like that. And so they're saying, well, how is it that you have 40% Republican voters, but they don't have 40% representation in Congress? And you do see that kind of across the board, right? What's happening now is something very big, though. The Supreme Court is looking to weigh in. And depending on how the Supreme Court weighs in, this could change everything. Currently, as things are right now, it's looking like the Supreme Court is going to lean in favor of Republicans. One of the big reasons, well, race politics are going to the wayside. Politico said this. It said the Supreme Court said Friday that it will weigh the constitutionality of a common form of redistricting used to protect the voting power of Black and Hispanic voters. The drawing of congressional districts where racial minorities make up at least half the population. Experts in election law said the move signals that the court may be poised to further narrow the Voting Rights Act. In a terse order issued Friday evening, the justices of the Supreme Court called for a briefing on whether the intentional creation of a second majority-minority congressional district violates the 14th or 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. And it says the order came in a case challenging Louisiana's congressional map, which contains 2 majority Black districts out of the state's 6 House seats. It is the case that Black voters tend to vote very heavy for Democrats. They've been moving Republican, but not by a large degree. You're talking like 16% maybe, roughly around there. Not a massive shift, but much larger than before. And so anytime they redistrict in ways that impacts Democrat votes, oftentimes it does impact, the people they cater to. It's identity politics, it's race politics, it's gender politics. It's that kind of stuff. And so if the Democrats can maintain holds based on identity politics, it means they can prevent Republicans from kind of winning over areas. Unfortunately, race is often used as part of these narratives. But if the Supreme Court overturns this, if they overturn the main tool the Democrats have been using to prevent Republicans from redistricting, this could change the entire country, basically. If Republicans can redistrict and not get hung up on race narratives, this would cause Democrats to lose up to 25 seats through nothing other than redistricting. Again, even Texas, 5 seats, but across the country, 20 additional seats. And if you have 25 seats flip in Congress, that's a hard thing to beat. Meaning Republicans could potentially gain a very solid hold over Congress. Now, look, also speaking about the midterm elections coming up sooner than you think, President Donald Trump is also suggesting that his push to cut drug prices is going to be one of the big issues to help Republicans. This is what Trump said to the press. Watch.
Mr. President, what advice do you have for Republicans on Capitol Hill heading into midterms? What do they need to do? What can they do to, hold?
Well, one of the things they're going to be talking about pretty soon are the tremendous drop in drug prices. We've cut drug prices by 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500%. I don't mean 50%. I mean 1,400, 1,500%. Because we're going favored nations. We want the same price as Europe gets. We want the same price as other country gets. And over the years, 25, 30 years ago, it started where they were charging us much more. And I put an end to it, with a letter that you saw last week. So I think that's going to be a point. I don't know how anybody could win an election if they're on the other side of that issue. So we'll be.
Now, this does show a very big change. I'd say on both sides of the aisle, Republican or Democrat, what we're seeing is that candidates are starting to see what actually gets people out to vote in polls. And it seems the big issue for people is not so much like gender politics. For some it is, but for most voters, it's quality of life. How does this actually affect my well-being? And a big part of that is the economy, but it's not just that. It's also safety, as we're seeing with the political narrative shift even in New York with Mamdani. A big part of it is also whether we can afford the basic goods and services. Can I afford rent this month? Can I afford groceries? Can I afford gas? Basic goods and services, quality of life. Can I live a comfortable life? And people are not trying to, prevent me from doing that. Now, for Democrats, we're also going to likely see more of that. I'd say in particular, as I mentioned briefly, AOC and Bernie Sanders, on their current campaign, because they're trying to become the main kind of branch of the Democrat Party, there's a lot trying to stop them from happening, even on the Democrat side. Some say they need to become more moderate. Some want to go more socialist. We'll see what happens come, again, the midterms, but after that, too, leading up to the presidential races. They've actually changed their narratives. What they're talking about is the wealthy 1%, right? Inequality. They're talking about equity, equality of outcome, while Republicans are talking about, right, equality of opportunity. Meaning they are to an extent, but not as much talking about race or gender or things like that. They are a bit. But for the most part, they've now shifted their narratives to talk about the economy. Same thing in New York with Mamdani. He's talking about the economy. Now, there's a good part of the party, the Democrats, that are shifting like this. And what's interesting is, again, they're talking about affordable groceries, high cost of living. How do you change this? How do you offer things that impact people's real experience? That is the new political narrative in the United States, politically, right? Now, also, on another topic, for the first time in 50 years, the United States now has negative migration. This is CNN on it. Watch.
How about net migration in the United States? Get this. It's down. It's going to be down at least 60%. We may be dealing with, get this, negative net migration to the United States in 2025. That would be the first time there is negative net migration in this country in at least 50 years. We're talking about down from 2.8 million in 2024. So Donald Trump has always run on tariffs, and he's run on a hawkish line on immigration. And on both of those issues, we are seeing record high tariff rates for this century going all the way back, well back into the early part of the 20th century. And when it comes to immigration, net migration, we are seeing record low levels, way down from where we were during the Biden administration. We are potentially looking at negative net migration for the first time in at least 50 years.
So you get that? Tariffs, migration, lowering the cost of drugs. Tariffs on migration, though, these are two of Trump's biggest issues. And for the most part, we're seeing him do what he said he was going to do on both of those. The big question leading up to the midterms is, will he be far enough along to show real impact for voters? Democrats are very much trying to block Trump on the tariffs. They tried overturning his right as president to do that. They're trying to block deportations, challenging it every step of the way. Some Trump voters, they look at, well, what have you accomplished? Some of them are saying, hey, you're not deporting people fast enough. The Trump side is saying, well, we're trying, we're being blocked from doing it. Tariffs as well. The big issue with tariffs, the goal is to bring manufacturing back to the United States. That's going to take like 2 years, at least, maybe even longer in some regards. The real economic benefit for Americans will not be felt until right before the presidential elections, meaning the midterm elections are the big question right now. Can Trump demonstrate enough of an effect that has a positive impact on people's quality of life where people recognize it enough to want to continue voting for his policies? This is going to be the big issue on the polls. Can the practical outcomes be strong enough to impact voters, right? For Democrats, they're also working on counter narratives to this. On the side of migration and deportations, they're trying to block deportations. The media on their side, they're focusing on personal stories. Look at this poor wife whose husband was deported. Look at this mother who had a kid here who gained citizenship through birthright citizenship, but she's an illegal immigrant and sent back to her country, forever separated. They're focusing on those stories. The media is pushing that very hard, trying to swing voters on that issue, again, using personal stories. And on the tariff front, right, on the Democrat side, they're more focused on higher costs of goods and whether this is affecting American businesses. Are American businesses struggling? What's the actual state of employment in the economy? Is this causing a spike in, let's say, grocery prices and so on? You're seeing cracks in the wall with this. In fact, CNN, a lot of actually Democrat influencers have come out and said, actually, it looks like the tariffs are causing a better quality of life for Americans, but it's mixed. It really depends on which media you're watching. Some of them are doubling down on the narrative, saying, no, it's not higher costs of goods, everybody's suffering. Some say everything's great. Now, personally, on both of these points, I've heard mixed stories. I've seen both sides of it. I think that in terms of how these issues will affect voters at the polls, though, a lot of it is going to come down to how it affects basic quality of life. What is the personal experience? Is my life better or is my life worse? Are they doing what they said they were going to do or are they not? When people go to the polls, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter for a lot of Americans. Many Americans will vote for whoever they think is best for their own interests. Most people in the world are like that. So it's going to come down to the practical experience. And what will that be? Well, again, we're going to be hearing a lot more about this as we move closer to the midterm elections. And of course, we'll be talking about it here the whole way through. That said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. Question here from Wilma Eden. You're saying race issues are stupid. I agree. You're saying Texas has a lot of conservative people, no matter what color. That's true. You know, actually, this is one issue I've been with as well. I mean, I don't like race politics. I think it's stupid. I find race politics annoying. I think there are people doing this because they want to divide us. I think when I look at this, all I see is like communist agitation propaganda. They're trying to drive wedges between people. They're trying to cause commotion and people fighting. Communism, through its agendas, always tries to create conflict between, dialectical groups, right? Whether that's classes or ages, right? Young people versus old people, or children versus parents, or wives against their husbands, or white people and black people fighting, or people of different races or tribes or cultures fighting. Everywhere communism goes, it tries to do this. Now, many of this comes down to identity politics, which comes again from, when you get into these ideas of how do you drive wedges between people. I don't like it one bit. I think it's horrible. And again, when I was growing up, these narratives weren't that strong. I think this is more of a new thing, and many people do remember that. The true narrative this comes from is critical theory, right? Critical theory. And critical theory, all it did was took the old Marxist idea of bourgeois against the proletariat, class warfare, class struggle. And because America is not as focused on classes, you have a lot of ability to move between classes in the United States. Unlike many countries, they had to create other issues to divide people. So they created critical race theory. They created critical gender theory. And when I look at race politics, all I see is critical race theory. They're trying to fill people's heads with hatred, and they're trying to turn people against each other and then use them politically. That's all it is. I think it's horrible. I don't think it should be allowed. I think it should be stopped. I think the whole country should move on from it. And I think it's stupid. I don't think most Americans also are like that. I can tell you, I have plenty of friends from all races, and they do not align like this. My family, especially because of my grandpa, a lot of his closest friends are Seminole Indians. In fact, he goes and stays on Seminole land a lot of the year. The Seminole Indians, they were, of course, the Native American tribe from Florida. And they're unique in that they never surrendered to the United States. They're very proud about it. So if you're driving through Oklahoma and you're going through the different reservations, you'll see, now entering the sovereign nation, the Apache Nation, now leaving the Apache Nation, now entering, different nations. When you get to the Seminole area, it says now entering Seminole County, not a reservation, not a nation. They're very proud about that. A lot of the Indians I know, the ones I know at least, they're very conservative. In fact, I know some of the Seminoles watch the show actually, because my grandpa knows quite a few of them. When it comes to like Latino voters, Hispanic voters, I don't think even the label of Hispanic or Latino identity, it's a new thing. Because just like Americans, most people from Latin America are mixed race. They're Portuguese or they're Spaniards. One of the reasons why they can actually get they can get citizenship in Spain if they can demonstrate that, by the way. A lot of them do. Many of them maybe have ancestry from the black slaves, who a lot of them went to Latin America. Many of them are one of the many narrative tribes, but they're oftentimes a mix of this, just like Americans are. The whole identity of this is a new thing, and it was started under a political narrative, again, critical race theory. But if you go to South Texas, one thing I found very surprising when I was in South Texas, when I was in Eagle Pass investigating, the border crisis, I was told by people there that when the illegals were coming over, they could not stay in that area because the Hispanic citizens there really did not like them, and they're not held back by race politics like the rest of the country might be. It was not safe there for illegal immigrants because they really don't like them. I've been told this as well by people who work on different job sites. Even the older illegal immigrants do not like the newer illegal immigrants. And if you watch what was happening, even in terms of voting in the 2024 elections, suddenly Donald Trump was getting a lot of Hispanic voters, meaning things are not as black and white as they're presented on the surface. I've talked to a lot of people myself. You might remember when before the elections, I went to Georgia and I was talking to people. I was doing like exit polls, talking to people who had just voted. I talked to a lot of people in Georgia who were black, right? And they told me very different things. I noticed a lot of women were voting for Kamala Harris. A lot of the men were voting for Trump. And I've been told this by a lot of black Americans. They're saying, yeah, the women were voting for Kamala, but the men were voting for Trump. It wasn't across the board, but that was a more common phenomenon that I watched. I don't think identity politics works like the media says it does. And if you want to ask me, I think this is why a lot of the media is trying to move away from identity politics. I think this is why a lot of the political campaigns are trying to move away from it. They're finding it does not resonate with voters like they thought it would. And I look forward to it. I look forward to the days when we stop paying attention to race and all this stupid stuff, personally. Kenneth Harris, you're saying, many Chinese believe a cultural revolution was being waged in the USA. I believe, thanks to Trump and many others, we are seeing a counterculture revolution to end the insanity. That's true. So, I know a lot of Chinese expats. I know a lot of second-generation Chinese, people whose parents might have come from China. I know a lot of people who've lived through the cultural revolution in China. I know many people who had to flee the CCP because they'd be killed if they went back. In fact, at Epic Times, we were started by Chinese dissidents, right? A lot of my colleagues have told me these kinds of stories, what they went through, what they dealt with in China, how horrible it was, what it was like when the communists took over. Many of them are old enough to remember. Many of them were witnesses to the Tiananmen Square massacre, several of my colleagues, in fact, and I've talked to them about it. And I can tell you why a lot of them have been so concerned with what they've been seeing happen in the United States with identity politics and the protests on the streets and other things. let me explain. This is what I've been told. When they were watching movements like Antifa, right? These blackout guys with black masks and black hoods and trying to be like that, physically beating and attacking people. A lot of Chinese Americans who lived in China previously, when they saw that reminded them of the Little Red Guards in China. That reminded them of the Little Red Guards. Basically, the CCP was recruiting like youth, and they were enraging them, telling them, the landlords are taking money from you, the evil rightists are, the counter-revolutionaries, you need to destroy them. And they were filling their heads with hatred. And these kids were going out and they were beating people and heckling people and insulting people. And for a lot of people who lived through that, when they look at American college campuses and they see these kids' heads filled with hatred, beating people and attacking people and heckling people, it looked like the same thing. For them, it looked like the same thing. When they see the campaigns trying to divide us, right? They saw that as well. When they saw that, they saw class warfare. When they see things to defund the police and they watch lawlessness spread on the American streets, for them that's memories of watching their own country really decline into just chaos, people fighting each other. A lot of what they watched reminded them of what they went through during the communist revolutions. And many of them told me, many of them did tell me that they were worried about this country, that they were very genuinely concerned about the United States, that communism was knocking at our door and a lot of people were asleep. So yeah, a lot of them are very aware of that, actually. Morris Film Photo, you're saying, is California partly or even mostly taken over, influenced by CCP, lawfare, etc. tactics? Yes. Yes, it is. Especially San Francisco. Okay, don't take my word for it. This was public. There's a now deceased woman who is kind of a known CCP agent. Her name was Rose Pak, Rosepak. She was referred to by even mainstream media as the kingmaker of San Francisco. What they would say is you could not get into politics without the blessing of Rose Pak. Meaning, anybody who wanted to get in politics in San Francisco, they had to play ball with the CCP. Don't take my word for it. Do a Google search, Rose Pak Kingmaker, and you'll be shocked. This was acknowledged and known. Different parts of California, you do have a lot of CCP influence as well. And it's not, I'd say this is a bigger picture, not even limited to there. I've been trying to raise awareness about one key issue. For a long time now, and I've been writing about this, again, going back to 2008, in fact. I've talked about a lot about the United Front. The other big thing is the CSSAs, Chinese Student and Scholar Associations, and other things like the Torch program, for example. The CCP, a lot of you have probably heard stories about economic theft and hackers and spies coming here and stealing stuff. That's a big deal. There's two sides to that. One side, the CCP talks about serving the motherland, returning to China. You come here, you go to American universities, you get into government-funded research programs, you go back to China, you give it to the CCP. That's a big thing. The more concerning side is what they call, quote-unquote, serving in place. They actually call it that, serving in place. And what does that mean? It means they'll try to plant you, right, the CCP. They'll try to plant these students in key targeted positions. They might try to get them into an assistant position for a governor. They might try to have them run for politics. They might put them up in a position where they can influence American businesses. Many businesses even lobby on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, lobby our own government on that front. Many of them will try to position people, hey, why don't you get a job in the military? And if you understand, you don't need to be a citizen to join the U.S. military. It's actually a path to citizenship. So you have non-U.S. citizens, Chinese, the cartels do it, the Mexican cartels. The cartels will send their foot soldiers to join the military in the United States, get trained by our military, then return and train the cartels on how to fight using our own training. They do that. The CCP does the same thing. In fact, I've been told by military officers that if you go to some of the Chinese communities, there used to, I don't know if it's still like this, but there'd be lines out the door for recruitment centers. And they were very much concerned that Chinese spies were infiltrating our military because we let it happen. We let it happen. You don't have to be a U.S. citizen to join the military. The bigger side is if you have a Chinese student go to an American university, graduate, get a degree, and then join the military, if you have a degree, you're on the path to becoming an officer. You can join as a lieutenant. And they get into, West Point. There's a big problem of CCP influence at West Point. They do this, and then what do you have? You have Chinese Communist Party officers working as agents in our own military. They do this to the IRS, they do it to the DOJ, they do it to the FBI, they do it to everything. And I'm not talking about leadership positions, I'm talking about like mid-level bureaucrats. The CCP, for a very long time, has been infiltrating our government. I've been talking about this since 2008. I've been trying to raise awareness of this since 2008. And a lot has happened since 2008. How many students who were in school in 2008, when I was sounding the alarm over this, are now, in their positions 10, 20 years? A lot of them. And it's been going on every single day. Every time one of them graduates and gets a job and gets pushed into a position, you have a new Chinese spy working as an agent within our own government. This, to me, is one of the biggest threats we face. Our government is being taken over from the inside. It's being conquered from the inside. We're all looking at Taiwan and we're saying, are we going to fight China? In the CCP's eyes, they've been at war with us for a very long time. And in the CCP's eyes, they already puppeteer American entertainment, American media, American business, and American politics. They believe they already puppeteer it. And they do, in many different ways. They already puppeteer our system. Look at Hollywood. Look at how Hollywood licks the boots of the CCP. Look at a lot of media. Look at New York Times. You have media that were publishing inserts of Chinese state-run media. You have media that kill stories about organ harvesting. New York Times did this. One of their own reporters said they did that. You have media that refuse to cover legitimate, serious, they'll cover some, but the real serious human rights abuses, they don't even touch it. You have American businesses that will never do anything against the CCP. They're terrified of the CCP. And within our own government, you have people who've been pushed into positions on these programs I've been warning about for over 20 years, or close to 20 years. I've been warning about it for close to 20 years. And nothing has been done to stop it. The problem is very advanced at this point. The problem is very far along. And if they don't root it out, we're going to lose our country. I'm saying this definitively. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter if it's Trump or Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders. If we don't take this issue seriously, it's not going to matter who's president. We're going to lose our country. Seriously. Right? Anyways, very serious stuff, and let's talk about something else. Let's see, another question here. Morris Film Photo, you're saying, is California, I already asked that one. Nancy K, you're saying, are cartels concerned right now with what's going on with ICE? Will most illegals be deported to safe countries? So, you're asking, there's two parts with this. Are cartels concerned with what's happening with ICE? There have been some cartels who've spoken to media and expressed that. This is, okay, briefly, when you see news outlets talking to cartels, there's a very dirty business tied in with that. So this is not commonly known, but it's known by people who have been covering this stuff for a while, right? I know Mexican journalists, very good friends of mine. I've done some reporting there as well. I've covered the cartels for a long time. And of course, I've investigated their CCP connections. There are different cartels. I don't need to say this, but I need to mention it in context. The cartels are fighting each other, right? The Sinaloa cartel and the New Generation cartel at each other's throats, fighting, right? They have the Knights Templar. They have all kinds of crazy cartels. They fight each other. They fight each other not only with like territorial disputes, they fight each other for local support. A lot of the cartels, they'll run, for example, like health clinics or food programs because they want the local population to support them. But they also fight for influence. They fight for good media coverage or negative media coverage. So the cartels actually have PR operations, public relations operations. And this is very dangerous for Mexican journalists. A lot of them get killed because of this. A lot of Mexican journalists have stopped talking about the cartels because of this. If a Mexican, and this is one of the reasons why you don't see it covered that much, frankly. If a Mexican journalist covers one of the cartels, if it's a positive story, that cartel will approach them and try to work with them and make them do positive coverage on them and negative coverage on their adversaries. And then when they do that, the adversary will pick up that same journalist and say, well, now you need to say good things about us and bad things about them. And so you can't do both. You can't do both. And if you criticize one of them after that, the other side will kill you. They will kill you. It's for that reason a lot of Mexican journalists came out, a lot of media said, we're just not even going to cover it at all because you had so many journalists who were getting killed by them. So what you have now, they're less likely to kill Americans. Not that they care about killing or not, but because it brings heat from the U.S. government, right? It makes news stories. They killed an American journalist. It brings heat on them. They don't want that. So they tend to not do it. But you have these journalists who, brag about, hey, I got special access to this cartel. It's not hard to get. The cartels want that. They want it. And so anyways, everything aside from this, the cartels are concerned about ICE because remember what Trump also did is he designated the cartels as terrorist organizations. If they get arrested, they're going to like El Salvador, right? They're not getting dropped off at the border and being told please don't come back. They're getting dropped off in El Salvador and saying enjoy your stay. That's what's happening to them. They're now designated as terrorists. Yeah, they're afraid. The problem you have with the cartels is they have a big footprint in the United States and they work with gangs. On the Mexican side, you might have seen the big narratives from their government. They're saying that Americans are the ones to blame for the drug trade because Americans buy the drugs and on the U.S. side, Americans traffic the drugs. Who are the people buying the drugs from the cartels? Oftentimes, it's street gangs. Who are the street gangs? Well, oftentimes it's Mexican street gangs, but they all do it. You have the Hells Angels doing drug trafficking. You have the Bloods and the Crips still around doing drug trafficking. You have the Latin Kings, all of them doing. Even the Aryan Brotherhood, the white gangs doing drug trafficking. And so yeah, it's the gangs doing drug trafficking. Are they concerned about ICE? Not really, because they're not illegal immigrants. Until the Trump administration, now that they've designated the cartels as being a terrorist organization, until they extend that and say aiding and abetting the cartels because they're terrorist organizations is also a crime. If you are aiding and abetting, an Islamic terrorist organization, you're going to go to jail for a long time. If you're a drug trafficker and you're working with the cartels, as we've seen so far, they're not being held to that same standard. Once they do that, or if they ever do that, then they're going to be afraid. Then they're going to be scared. Because what that does is it would make effectively most of the drug trade an act of terrorism. you could be criminally charged with aiding or abetting a terrorist organization. And so until that happens, they're not going to be really concerned, but we'll see if we ever get there. That would be a big move if Trump did. We'll see if they ever actually do it. You were also asking, will most illegals be deported to safe countries? For the most part, yes, because where do they come from? Most of the illegal immigrants, you're talking the ones they were giving temporary protection status to, Haiti, Venezuela, these kinds of countries, right? They had a lot of people from Honduras here. Some of the unsafe countries like Ukraine, that's a whole other issue. I mean, even Haiti's kind of black and, not intended that way, but black and white on the issue. It's a little complicated. Mexico is in fact deemed a safe country. On the American side, we often talk about the border towns, which are, you have some very nice areas and some very nice, not nice areas. If you go to like Mexico City, it's very nice. It's a fantastic place. There are places in Mexico that are awesome, like really nice. You don't have a lot of cartel violence. They tend to maintain it pretty well, and they're very, very nice areas. Mexico is deemed a safe country. Panama is deemed a safe country. El Salvador used to not be, but it's now deemed a safe country. Most of them are going to be sent back to safe countries. There are concerns about some other ones. Cuba is a big one, again, under a communist government that is not very friendly to the United States. Sending people back there would be very controversial because a lot of them are fleeing communism. But we'll see. We'll see how they handle it. The ones from African nations or Middle Eastern countries or China, that's going to be very complicated. I don't know if they're going to send back people who've escaped the CCP or how they're going to deal with that, because you can get sanctuary. You can get that if you come from China, if you're deemed to be a part of a group that's facing genocide there. I don't know how they're going to handle it. They are deporting some people, but when you're sending people back to countries where they're going to be persecuted, it is a lot more controversial. So short answer to that, most will be sent back to safe countries, but not all of them. And the ones not being sent back to safe countries, that's going to be very controversial. DC's Bees, you're saying, the culture never changed. We were just being forced into it. We were just snapping back to closer to normal. And isn't that fantastic? Okay, funny note. Family issue. My wife has been taking care of her parents in Florida. Her dad's over 90 years old. Her mom, she's having health problems. So my wife is down there taking care of her parents. My daughter's been staying between, here and there, living with me or living with her during this time. And my daughter and I have been having 90s movie night. So we're watching like old 90s movies. It's so funny watching old movies because you remember like things that people would be really offended about right now were not controversial back then. We just watched Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, and they have that whole part where he freaks out and where he kissed the. I don't want to ruin the movie for you all if you haven't seen it, but he kisses the police chief. It turns out she's a man, and he puts the pieces together and he's like, "Finkel is Einhorn, Einhorn is Finkel," and he breaks down. He's like in the shower crying and burning his clothes and stuff. You could not have that kind of humor these days. It was really funny, but you can't have that kind of humor these days. We watched the Matrix, the first one. Such a good movie. That movie held up so well. And it was interesting because my daughter commented afterwards. She's like, it's funny that, if they were to make that movie these days, they would have made a bigger deal about race. Trinity, the female character, very strong character, but she was very feminine, actually. Morpheus, right, the kind of spiritual leader in that movie, played by a black actor. They never made mention of his race. Race was never made to be a big deal. A lot of the other characters were quote-unquote diverse. They didn't make a big deal about it. There was no hint of race politics. Even though if you made that movie these days, they'd try to sell you on race politics. And it was so interesting seeing that because at that time, we never thought about that. We never thought, oh, they made a black actor the lead. This must be woke. No, we didn't care. We didn't think like that, right? It didn't even occur to us. E. Frago, Blazing Saddles. Maybe we'll put that on the list too. Was Blazing Saddles controversial when they made it? That movie was a bit over the top, but it was funny. Even some of the older humor, like Dave Chappelle, like he was over the top with this stuff. I remember watching Richard Pryor with my uncle. He was hilarious. I could not even repeat some of the jokes without getting canceled. People would want my head on a platter if I even mentioned some of the things they talked about. How is it that people didn't care about this stuff back then and we'd laugh at it? We thought it was hilarious. Whereas these days, it's almost like we've been conditioned to be offended by everything, right? If I want to talk about like race, like politics, on the communist side, they talk about it as they want to have you become conscious of these things. So they want to have race consciousness. They want to have gender consciousness, meaning they tried to make you view things like that. Whereas before the notions of it would not even occur to us. And so on DC's point, I would agree. I don't think many of us ever really agreed with that stuff, but we were conditioned to be concerned about it because we didn't want to have our lives ruined. We didn't want to get canceled. We didn't want to get fired from our jobs. We didn't want to mention it. Well, I did, which is why I'm still like demonetized, by the way, right? I've paid the price. But a lot of people did not want to do that because, it's hard to make a living if you get canceled. But I think you're right. I don't think people ever fully went along with it. We were pushed into submission for a long time. And I do think things are snapping back. Larry Friend, you're saying, we are at our best as Americans, but Sun Tzu nailed it. Divide and conquer. And that is true. That is true. If you ever watch the way that animals hunt, watch the way that wolves hunt their prey. Watch the way that lions hunt their prey. You know what they do? They try to separate the most vulnerable from the pack. They'll go after the children oftentimes, right? They'll go after the weakest. They'll go after the ones who they can separate from the group. They can divide and then they devour them. I'd say communists do the exact same thing. They go after your children. They go after the most vulnerable. They go after the people suffering the most. And then once they separate them, they devour them. They fill their heads with hatred. They fill their heads with all these notions. And then they try to turn, they don't just eat them. They turn them against who they separated them from. That's what they do. So I'm very much in favor of unity, of harmony, right? I know it's getting late in the day, but I'll mention one last thing. I found it very interesting when I was reading about dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism, called the living soul of Marxism, is identify, contradict, and eliminate the middle. Meaning, if you want to create a communist movement, this is all they do. They look at the cultural standards of a society, they identify issues, they contradict them, meaning you take whatever value the country has and you flip it upside down. You create what religiously would be called a satanic interpretation, right? So if your society believes in marriage, you promote divorce. If your society believes in respecting your parents, you teach disrespect of parents. If your society has a pillar that depends on the harmony of cultures and races, you manufacture hatred and disrespect between cultures and races. What they do then is they build, identify, contradict, eliminate the middle. Then you create contradictory narratives and you say there's no middle ground. You can't be in the middle. You have to go one extreme or the other. When you have one extreme or the other, you have what's called dialectical conflict, right? Struggle. When you create dialectical struggle, This is part of the Hegelian element of communism. Conflict leads forward. They want two opposite extremes fighting with each other. And between that, where harmony once existed, you now have conflict. Rather than getting along, they want them fighting. The other side of communism is they have their issues, but they actually depend on counter-revolutionaries. People coming out and arguing and fighting and becoming part of the infectious hatred. The revolutionary and the counter-revolutionary. That's what they want. When they spread racism and they say, you're all evil racists, they want you to become racist right back. That's what they want. And because of that, it spreads like a disease. It infects a society. What I found very interesting is that when Mao Zedong was writing about the implementation of dialectical materialism in the Chinese system, in China, they have these ideas, they have different philosophies at the foundation of their society. Confucianism establishes a lot of the social standards and the mannerisms. Taoism reflects a lot of the ideas around harmony. Taoism has the yin-yang symbol, right, the black and the white. And it basically represents the harmony of opposites, right? That between opposites, men and women, heaven and earth, all these things, that there's a certain type of harmony that maintains a society. When Mao Zedong talked about implementing dialectical materialism, he described it as this. He said, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. In other words, a scientific method of disintegrating a society. Where you once had a whole, you now have 2. Where you once had 2, you now have 4. So you've split it in 2, and then you took those ones that were split in 2 and you split them in 2, and you keep doing that. You chop it up, right? You divide it. And by doing that, when you do it enough, what do you have? You have the disintegration of social order. You have the disintegration of social harmony, which, if you understand communism, is what it aims to do. That is, in fact, the end goal of communism, what they call the negation of the negation, the destruction of everything, from which they believe true communism will be born. Maybe true communism looks like the end of the world, right? It looks like the destruction of everything, because that's what they want. They believe that even in the end, even the state must be negated. Even the communist system needs to be destroyed. It's the last sacrifice at the altar of Karl Marx to achieve his vision. They want to destroy. That is all it does. They want to destroy. And so, yes, on Larry Friend's part, divide and conquer. Literally, they want to divide you. They want to turn you against each other. And if you ask me, what do you do about it? Well, what do they want to take from you? They want to destroy the family. They want to destroy social harmony. They want to destroy tradition and religion. Maintain these, and you will not be destroyed. You will not be taken down by it. Maintain your faith. Whatever it may be, I'm not trying to preach any one thing to any of you. Keep your faith. Keep your culture. Don't let hatred infect your heart. Value family. And I know this sounds cheesy, but value your community. Value the people around you. Don't let yourself be infected with their hatred. That's how you guard yourself against that, and that's how you prevent it from doing what they want to do. Anyways, folks, let me know what you think in the chat. What do you think about this whole culture war? Do you think it's really going away? Do you think there are people still wanting to push it, and they're just waiting in the wing, ready to burst out the doors like the Spanish Inquisition, saying, nobody expects us? Do you think it's like that? What do you think is going to happen? Or do you think that they've learned their lesson? Society has rejected it. They can't come back because, you know what, we're all kind of aware of it now. We all went through it and we don't want it. Do you think it's over? Do you think it's still there? What do you think? Let me know in the chat. That said, join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, please do not forget to like this video. And that said, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.